Show me your heart. I know that it's beating. Tell me that you love me too. So I know your heart is true. 'Cause I need some proof of love. 'Cause I need some proof of love. 'Cause I need some proof of love.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Proof of Love. Unfortunately, Lauren's not joining me on this show today, but I wanted to continue a rather serious show that I had started last week with Chuck. And Chuck told us a story about what was going on in his past. We'll touch on that a little bit in case you missed the last show and you're just tuning in now. But this time he also brought his beautiful paramour, Melina, who in a lot of ways I think helped him heal, and I think in maybe some less conventional ways. And so I'm all about the healing for this show. What you've been through is obviously quite intense, and I like the idea that even through really, really hard times, we can find a way through. So thank you very much, Chuck and Melina, for joining us on Proof of Love. You were on a different episode if people want to check out that one too, like as a couple. But yeah, thanks so much.
Yeah, glad to be here.
Thanks for having us.
Great, thank you. So for people who are not familiar with what happened in last week's show, what happened, Chuck? So you obviously, well, actually give us a little bit of backstory.
Yeah, so the short version is that I discovered when I was 9 that I wasn't going to get a mom. Up until that point, that I thought I was going to get one. I confronted my father, and he told me that she was shot in a burglary. I found out eight years later, when I was 17, visiting my grandmother, essentially on her deathbed. She was suffering from a cancer tumor the size of a watermelon in her stomach, and she essentially told me that was not the case with my mother, that she had been stabbed 27 times, and 2 weeks prior to her death, she had witnessed an argument between my father and my mother, she was threatening to take me away from him, and he said that if you do, I'll kill you, and 2 weeks later she showed up dead. So I learned that when I was 17, and then I kind of processed a lot of that between the ages of 17 and 23, and really ever since, I mean, that whole experience throughout my life has always caused me to think about death. And when you posted on Facebook about, a murder that had occurred, I kind of shared my thoughts, and that's kind of where we are today.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, like, when you think of a particularly violent death, it's a whole other animal. So it was really nice of you to share that. I can't imagine it's particularly pleasant, but you seem to have really gotten through a lot of that. And I believe that in the last show, there were a few things that kind of you touched on, which was that your first marriage, you feel, was really impacted by it. And that also that your father didn't abuse you physically. And I thought that was really so unusual, because if he was a violent man, why not on you? And, feel free to go in either direction with that.
Yeah, I thought about that a lot. It was always confusing to me because I would see him beat women, at least 2 women that he was with, and I was aware of at least one other that he had dated or had been together with for some period of time. But it always confused me that he would beat these women and never lift a finger to punish me. He would barely even yell at me. He didn't like to raise his voice at me. It was very strange to me. My childhood mind thought maybe the spirit of my mother was just kind of present and somehow affecting that. But I think where I'm at now is he developed some kind of moral code in his head, where he thought he could make amends for the situation by not harming me directly any further, since he had probably taken my mother from me. So
wow, that's a really good point. That is probably what it was, is that he already felt like, do you think, because if he went, I don't mean to go moralizing, but if he went around and kept doing it though with other women, that's such an unusual way that people can kind of make peace and continue on with their lives. Because I don't think everybody who loses their temper and kills somebody even is an inherently evil person, but don't know. It's so heavy.
Yeah.
Melina, what was this like for you when you first heard this? Like, I mean, it's obviously your first few dates. It's not the first thing that comes up, right? But then when it does, I mean, what happens?
Yeah. Man, I mean, I was definitely surprised. I'd never known anybody in that kind of situation. It's hard to think back to what I felt initially. I think initially, honestly, I was like, all right, I obviously chose someone with a lot of baggage. But, you know, that said, it's like knowing him for 7 years now, I do believe he is actually like a very exceptional person to have gone through something like that and to, I mean, not just go through it. I mean, that shaped his whole childhood. And to be the person he is now, and be so grounded, and really take responsibility for his own stuff and not try to push it off. I think that's a huge part of how he's exceptional, because most people who face these things early on in life, they tend to blame things that happen on their circumstances rather than realizing they have the power within themselves to move through them and rise above that. And I know that's hard for a child to understand that, but somehow along the way, like, he was able to realize, like, he has it within him to move through it and to heal from it. And I mean, that's not something, I feel like he's still healing from it, just like we're all still healing. I think as long as we're still in these bodies, there's still something to heal on some level. And that's fine. We're all a work in progress, you know? But yeah, I mean, it's been interesting because even now his father is still alive, but there's no relationship. And I think it was a couple years ago, he actually thought he was going to pass, and he had no interest still in talking to him. And he was okay with that. Mm-hmm. So there's been some peace made, and there's obviously been some very deep healing that's already occurred.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I guess, you know, kind of rounding that out from my perspective, it's very early on, it did become something like we talked about in the last show, something around identity. And I had to make a choice, I think, in my early adolescence about what kind of person I was going to be, because, you know, I was learning about my heritage and my history and all this stuff. And I noticed that a lot of people build their identities around their family, you know, and I just didn't have that as an option. So as an outsider kind of looking in, it looked, I think I saw something about society and culture and identity building that allowed me to kind of be more proactive in the kind of identity that I wanted to build for myself. And that process, I think, began in my early adolescence. And I didn't know what to call it then, but now looking back, I think that's what it was.
So you, Melina, you've been through some personal healing on your own. I think you had some health problems, if I recall. I know that's what happened. And so you've kind of worked through that. Can you go into that and maybe apply it a little bit? Like, how did you take the things that you learned from your own journey, and how did you have to convince Chuck, like, hey man, I think you could deal with some inner work? Or was he just like, yeah, baby, give me the juice? You know, how did that go? Well,
I would say, like, it's, you know, definitely for the bulk of our relationship, the focus was on my healing and my situation, because I was in a crisis mode for like 2-3 years, like ongoing crisis. So, but that said, like, Chuck has been along for the ride. And even though the focus has been on me, you know, when you're in relationship, you're a mirror for each other. And so Chuck was obviously going through things himself and evolving and healing in himself. And I didn't really need to convince him of anything that I was doing, because, one, there were things at play that were really going on, I guess, like subconscious. Like, there were subconscious things that really weren't like something you were like intentionally moving through, but it was happening as a result of me healing. Because when you're in a partnership, you know, you're so connected that you can't, and that if you have a healthy relationship and you are close, you know, you can't really, my healing isn't separate from his healing, you know. And he saw what I was going through and what ultimately eventually worked. And there was no denying that this stuff is legit, that it's, I mean, I asked him just the other day, I was like, what is it like to see me now compared to how I was like 5 years ago, because he's the only person who's really seen me like, I mean, barely existing, just hanging on, and then now to be where I'm at. And I'm like, that must be really weird for you, you know?
Well, it's transformative, yeah. And to kind of flavor that, like, that early on in our relationship, it became very quick. Like, within 2 months of us dating, she was diagnosed with this Hashimoto's disease, right? And the first couple of years, several years of our relationship was essentially her not only addressing that, but addressing all of her, chronic body issues that were afflicting her. And it had been compared by somebody that we had been seeing, a shaman that we saw for a while. She told me that it sounded like a person who was caring for a terminally ill cancer patient.
Yeah.
And so it was very much like that. Like, there would be days, she had good days and bad days, and most days I was basically kind of holding the house together, just taking care of everything that could be taken. I managed all the bills, I managed everything that I could, and she would have barely enough energy to walk halfway down the block, from all the things, the chronic illness that she was dealing with.
Yeah, and I want to say too, like, it wasn't just Hashimoto's, because by a year into our relationship, a year and a half or so, and I was it took place, I don't really want to go into what caused it, but I ended up going through a spontaneous Kundalini awakening, which is a very, very intense spiritual awakening, which is like nothing else. It's incredibly profound. It's very bizarre. There's like all these different things that happen on every level, emotionally, physically, mentally, and of course spiritually. It's hard to speak to, but it's a very profound process. And it was difficult. It was a crisis, literally 24/7. I was not sleeping for, I don't know how, a couple years, like 10 minutes at a time, like very light sleep. And this ended up resulting in what I was going on with the Hashimoto's. It ended up getting much more intense, essentially, because of the stress that my body was in from this other process that was going on. So that's what really ended up taking me down, so to speak. I'm not a victim, but I ended up being really in a very weakened state on all levels, and I couldn't think straight. I was like in fight or flight constantly, like literally constantly in this fight or flight state, and my body was very, very unsettled with all these kinds of disturbing sensations. And anyway, yeah, I had no energy. I had no cognitive, like my cognition was very low, and so this is why Chuck was my caretaker essentially for, I don't even know how long, at least 2 years, more like 3 probably.
Yeah, that's why I say 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
And if I may plug, out of this healing journey, she created a website, KundaliniSupportNetwork.org.
Yeah.
If anybody needs help with that particular kind of spiritual crisis situation, definitely check that out. There's a number of practitioners on that website that she's personally consulted with who are willing to offer their services to help people through such crises.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, wait, why is a Kundalini awakening a crisis? Can't it just be like a good thing and you're like, oh man, life is so good, I've been missing it all this whole time? Like, that sounds like I want to sign up for that.
That's a great question, and it's different for everyone. For me, it was so quick, and my body wasn't in the position I didn't have a good foundation, a physical foundation, for the energy to move through me. Ideally, something like this is more gradual. And so some people have wonderful experiences, but in general, there is a certain intensity to this, because your identity can completely dissolve, and you're like, what am I? Who am I? And you feel like you're on this constant trip, essentially, and you're not being altered by any kind of substances, but you can feel like your whole world is slipping away, and who you are. It's like a continual existential crisis. But there's that aspect, but then with me, like, my physical body was also deteriorating so fast that I had all these crazy sensations, and my anxiety and my stress was just constant. There was pulsing in my body. I was seeing flashing lights when I closed my eyes. My heart rate was constantly beating super quickly and hard, and at resting too. It was insane, and it was very intense, but it's not like that for everyone. It really depends on where the person's at, what their soul wants, because I think my soul for some reason wanted to go through this in this way, and I think to help people essentially to see, like, okay, this is one level of, like, deep as fuck, like intense hell that someone can be in. And now I know I can relate to people who might have been there or are there. And so I can actually speak to that and help them climb out of that hole, you know? So, and this is like on a spiritual level, energetic level, but also physically as well, because my physical body got to such a bad state. And I came out of it and healed. I'm like, holy cow, the body is amazing. The human body is so intelligent and powerful and amazing. And I think that's actually, just to like veer off a little bit, why we've been suppressed, why we've been controlled, because there's so much inherent power within us. And I think that there's a lot of us who are seeing that and rising up now. But the more you tap into that natural ability that we all have to heal, it's like we're incredible. Like, we're limitless. Like, I really believe like we're able to do so much, especially when we work together. So anyway, sorry, I kind of went off on a tangent there about the body, but
I like that tangent. So I was just talking to Brent Nally, who was on my show, and we were talking about the placebo effect, and it can account for 30% of the impact of a medical like miracle, right? It could 30% chance that it's just your mind. And when I think about kind of like woo-woo stuff, and you know, I hear people talking about healing, I'm like, all right, dudes. But when you hear about it from like a little bit more of a scientific perspective, I mean, this is pretty proven. So that's really neat.
You know, it's funny that you bring that up, because I was thinking about the placebo effect this morning, and my scientific mind really, I always looked for the science to understand more about the stuff that she's been uncovering and discovering and practicing. And, you know, it has really, like, that scientific journey has really awakened my spiritual aspects in so many ways, because I now believe that placebo effect is directly tied to the power of consciousness. You know, the placebo effect is a real thing. And what if there was a way that we could just invoke the placebo effect? You know, why would you not at least try that first with anything that you have, with any problem that you have? And what if there's certain techniques and healing modalities that can indeed invoke what scientists call the placebo effect, but is in actuality some kind of tapping into the source energy of the universe that causes molecular frequencies to vibrate in harmony with one another, that causes water to structure itself, that causes cells to expel viruses and repair themselves. This is all, you know, something that I believe that I think is going to be coming over the next couple of decades, which is, you know, something along the lines of frequency healing or energy healing or these kinds of things. But this is something that I believe is the next wave of holistic medicine.
Yeah, and I think he's tapping in and touching on this idea that, like, we have this idea that healing has to be difficult, and I know I definitely believe that, and like based upon my healing journey, I think in a way manifested that. I don't think healing has to be difficult. And I think there are ways for it to be, you know, smoother and quicker and I mean, and seamless in a way. And I think that's that aligns with what he was just sharing. You know, we're entering into this time where things are happening so much quicker. I mean, you look at the world outside, a lot of people think like, oh, it's scary, all this stuff is chaotic and crazy. But I really see it as like a destruction of the old, and how it's good that it's coming down, and it might look a little nuts right now, but actually, in actuality, it's all happening very fast, because there's an opportunity for us to create a more balanced world, a more harmonious world, where we're all tapping into these sorts of inherent gifts and abilities.
Yeah, and that's the thing that I think that she's been really kind of pursuing and exploring, like what are the best possible healing modalities. And you know, one of the first things that we came across in our journey together with this was what's his name? Dr. Power versus Force. There's a book called Power versus Force that really has shaped a lot of
Hawkins.
Hawkins.
Richard, is it Richard or Hawkins?
Yeah, by Dr. Hawkins. And in it, he explains how there have been millions of tests using this technique called kinesiology. And I don't know if you've heard of it, but it's
you might have heard of muscle testing.
More commonly known as muscle testing.
You heard of muscle testing?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So that helped. Like initially, she would do a lot of muscle testing. We learned to do it together. And it's, it doesn't take very long to learn, but you can get better over time to test, should we eat this? Would it be a good day to do this? Would it be helpful to use this supplement? These kinds of things. And we were at some points testing like that 20 times a day.
So, yeah, when I was really sick,
Mm-hmm.
it was pretty constant.
And now that has evolved to a point where we don't have to do it together anymore. She's learned a way to do that same kind of muscle testing on her own, and that is actually a precursor to one of the more recent modalities that she's digging into of the emotion code, where it depends on the muscle testing and solid kinesiology in order to progress you through the phases of emotion code healing modality.
Mm-hmm.
What is emotion code healing modality?
All right, so it's basically a way for us to all unload our emotional baggage, which we all have, right? I mean, and unfortunately, we actually came into this world with some degree of it, because trapped emotions can actually get passed down, so we can inherit them. But we also experience plenty of our own throughout our life, and it's essentially these balls of energy, and because emotions are energy.
Frequency.
Yeah. Each emotion has its own particular frequency. But they're balls of energy that get trapped in the body if they're not able to process. So say you experience, you experience some kind of issue with a friend and they really, really deeply disappoint you. And you're not able to process that emotion for whatever reason. Like maybe you distract yourself or you don't have the time to deal with it in that moment. That energy can get trapped in the body. And all of these different, and this can happen. This happens all throughout our lives. And like people usually have like thousands of different instances of these trapped emotions. And these contribute to all sorts of imbalances in the body, whether it's emotional or mental or physical even, or spiritual, of course, too. All these things, because everything's intricately connected like that, because we're holistic. These trapped emotions can cause all kinds of imbalances and symptoms. And I've seen it help like everything from energy issues, to sleep issues, to physical pain, to
pet poo issues.
Oh, yeah. Pet issues, because you can do this on animals as well. But yeah, I literally, I just run through this chart and release one emotion at a time, anywhere from 8 to 12 in like a session usually.
And it can be done remotely.
Yeah.
We can do one with you right
gentle
now.
And
Should we do a test emotion? Give me one. Come on.
I mean, I don't have like a chart in front of me.
I have my phone. I could grab my phone.
No, we're not going to do that. Next time.
Okay.
I mean, no, but yeah, it is super quick, super gentle, and it's super effective in my experience on us, on clients, on animals.
Yeah, in the past month or so, she's really kind of ramped up her practice with clients, and I mean, she doesn't go into the details, of what she's working on with clients,
right.
But she does tell me that, they have reported back a shift or positive improvement in the area that we've worked on.
Yeah.
So it's and I have experienced it myself, and I don't know if I mentioned this on the last show, but one of the most profound things that I experienced with this particular healing modality was she released what's called a heart wall. And I don't know exactly what that is, but what I do know is the next day, my heartbeat had changed permanently. Like, it completely changed. Throughout my life, my heartbeat has generally been, like, very strong and very intense, but not super high, like, fast pace. So I probably had high blood pressure, but a low heart rate, is my guess. But the intensity of my heartbeat, I noticed it as soon as I woke up. I woke up and I was like, what's going on? Hello? Like, usually I can feel my heartbeat.
Still beating?
Yeah, but it was so much more rested, so much less intense.
This was like 2-3 months ago now, and it's been like that ever since.
Ever since, hasn't gone back. It's just been so nice. Unless I'm working out, that's the only time that it gets intense.
Right, of course,
now.
Yeah, but that's pretty cool. I like that. So I have a question. You guys seem very in love, but you've also been going through a lot of torture, right? Like a lot of healthy stuff, and that's not the sexiest thing, right? And also, I was going to ask you, like, how do you stay romantic? But I actually, while you were saying your story, Melina, I was thinking to myself, would I be able to accept someone caring for me, and would I not feel like a burden to that person? So luckily you guys both had your really traumatic, crappy thing to maybe balance it out. But like, does that feel weird to you? You know, did it ever feel like, oh my God, you know, I'm all sick, this guy's not, he's doing all this stuff, or vice versa, like, oh my God, I got this family stuff, like, she's not going to want to date me, you know? Like, did that ever become a concern, or was it something that you could maybe leverage into growing your love more?
That's a great question, actually, because I know from my side, that's definitely something I dealt with. I felt like I was just, for a while, just a burden, because I was so reliant on him. And I mean, he was amazing, and you know, like, thankfully, like, he loves to be of service, but you know, at some point it's kind of a bit much.
I got overwhelmed a lot.
Yeah. But yeah, that was tough for me for a while. I definitely felt like I was asking too much of him. I felt very needy, and to some degree I could have been, but I think it was just part of my journey. Now I don't feel that way. I feel like it's much more balanced. I love giving back to him and doing things for him. Acts of service is one of my primary love languages. So I love to show him my care in that way. And it's different now, but I definitely went through that for quite a while. Yeah.
What about you, Chuck? Like, how is that for you? Do you have any advice? You know, like, how do you keep it together during such a, you know, that's a lot of pressure as a man, as a person.
Yeah, I mean, I in my first marriage, it kind of, some of it roots in my first marriage. Some of the trauma and the pain roots in my first marriage, because in my first marriage, I realized probably about 4 or 5 years in that I was unhappy, but I really didn't spend much time addressing my own emotions, and I was very much entrenched in, let's say, religion. And so I felt that it was my duty to soldier on no matter how I felt, and just continue with this marriage unhappily because I had children involved, and just, you know, live it out and be married to this person that I, you know, was not happy with. Until, you know, for a long period of time. So I had this kind of, and I think a lot of men have this soldiering mentality, this self-sacrificing mentality of, I just got to do this, and it doesn't matter whether or not I'm miserable, because this is my duty as a human, as a man. And, you know, between that divorce and finding myself and really kind of renewing my own spirit, I had to make this identity choice of, hey, I don't want to be that person anymore. I need to be a person who balances the care of others with the care of himself. And so this was like our marriage was an extreme test of exactly that. It was almost like the universe said, okay, you asked for this, so here it is. Here's the ultimate test of how are you going to balance your own emotion and your own needs with this person who is nearly 100% dependent on you. How are you going to do it, Chuck? And, you know, I felt like it wasn't easy, but I navigated it in such a way where I was constantly, every day, asking myself about the principles that I believed in. Voluntarism, you know, personal care, self-love, love of others, you know, all these different kinds of things just swirling around with all these little minute choices of, you know, do I want to go play poker tonight, knowing that Melina's probably not going to feel good, or am I going to stay home and, you know, do the dishes and clean the house, you know, because I only have so many places I can allocate my time. So it was this just constant asking, constant testing, constant affirmation of, you know, am I living in the principles? And it became more and more clear when I was falling away from my principles. I'm like, shit, I didn't love myself that time, or shit, I didn't love Melina that time. And so, you know, that was essentially the path that I took to navigate it, and it was a very emotionally taxing, but also emotionally growing path. So that's I mean, reflecting on it, that's the best way I think I can describe it.
Yeah, it's really interesting, because at the beginning we were talking about, that's why I was saying, like, oh, the focus was so much on me for so long and my healing, but in the meantime he was going through this. He was going through his own emotional healing journey that was really deep in and of itself, because of him having to care for me, or choosing to care for me, I should say.
Yeah.
And that was really cool. I see that now that I'm in a different place and I can see the bigger picture and look back at what happened. And it's really cool how it all plays out. That's part of being in a relationship, you know, because oftentimes we think like, you know, we get so consumed by our own thing, possibly, especially if we're in like a crisis mode, that we don't really think about what's going on for the other person. But now it's like, wow, I feel like in a way it was a gift for him, you know. I wouldn't wish that upon us again, but, you know, it was an opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't know. Honestly, like, I want to be straight. Like, I thought about, you know, ending the relationship a lot. And it wasn't like, you know, I was 100% dedicated all the time. But, you know, I never cheated on her, you know, nothing like that ever happened. And I never, you know, it just became something where I resolved myself that as long as she's committed to, you know, continuing to try to heal and continuing to try to grow, I will be too. And that's kind of where we set our first chips is, you know, that was the ante to play the game. Are you going to try or not? Are you going to commit or not? And commitment for us meant, you know, just engaging at these very small little levels. You know, do you need this? Do we need this? Is this good for us? Those kinds of things.
You know, you seem to have a sense of honor, Chuck, and I mean, I would think that that is sometimes something that comes from a positive male role model. Where do you think that you got that from?
That's a.
I mean,
awesome.
maybe your father is a good role model in some ways. Like, you know what I mean? You seem to give a crap about that, right?
Yeah. So, it's when I realized that, I mean, I used to complain a lot, and sometimes I still do. You know, I didn't have parents who taught me this or that. You know, I didn't have a mom who taught me how to love. You know, that was one of my go-to victim stories. You know, and you know, my dad neglected me. You know, another one of my go-to victim stories. It's taken some time, but I've kind of let those go. It's taken some time, and what I did do was look to books. Really, I looked to the members of our society who were men who were teaching, you know, sound principles, things that I didn't have to like. I didn't want to learn techniques. I wanted to learn things that I could just put in my soul and just live a certain way. And those people who I think who most influenced me, first it was Eckhart Tolle, who was very deeply spiritual and kind of helped me to realize that not knowing is the place where you start. Like, you start at zero. Whenever you're doing anything, you should always start at zero and just say, hey, I don't know. And that's where you can really open your mind and learn. And then David Deida, The Way of the Superior Man, really helped me understand some very basic principles of how to love yourself and how to love a woman, you know, in perhaps what may be considered a traditional sense, but these principles are really timeless, the ones that he teaches. And they're very challenging. If you listen to David Deida as a man in this society, just thinking about it actually chokes me up a little bit. It's hard. It's hard to do the things that he's suggesting, to live by the principles that he espouses. But when you do, it's almost like going from living paycheck to paycheck to saving 10% every single time, like with every paycheck. At some point, you see a big payoff. You are thanking your past self for having done a thing. Oh, thank goodness I loved her in this way. Oh, I'm so glad that I blah blah blah. That's something that's kind of carried into a new kind of identity practice of always be thanking your past self. Like, I will always want to be thanking my past self as much as possible, not cursing him. I don't want to hate old Chuck. I want to love old Chuck and be appreciating what he did for now Chuck.
What about you, Melina? Do you think that that's like, do you think that the honor is a male? I think it has something to do with like a divine masculinity, right? Like their callings. I feel like you've really stepped into your divine feminine. I hate when people say that because I think it sounds so stupid, and I don't like making fun of men. I think everybody's just saying toxic masculine. But to me, this is the inverse. This is the beauty of man. Was this something that you were looking for in a partner? Is this something that you value for yourself?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. And it's been really interesting too because he's so different from when we met. I mean, I'm not going to say he wasn't a man of honor, but there's sort of like salesy, like like showy, like there was a mask there, and I like would call him on it because I'm like, what is this? Like, who are you really? And he's changed so much now. Like, I just feel like he's so genuine, he's so authentic, and he is this very strong masculine presence in my life, and I'm so grateful for it. And I think part of that he's been so molded, not by me. It's not like oh, I did this to him, but I feel like, sorry, I just took off my mic. But I feel like the heck happened? All right. Through the challenges that he's encountered, through these adversarial times, especially like in going through my healing process with me and him doing his own healing, like he has changed tremendously, and I feel like he holds this space, and people look at him now, and I know I see it, and I hear from other people like how they view him and how he's so respected, and I'm like, I feel really proud of him for what he's gone through in his own journey and his own healing and transformation. And yeah, it's incredibly valuable. And I think like this is just part of like, you mentioned like needing the divine feminine, and this is part of why we're together, I think, and we're like here yinning and yanging together and playing off of each other. I mean, we all have both elements within us. Like I have the masculine, he has the feminine in him too, right? But there's definitely more of one in both of us. Yeah.
That's something that, in my spiritual journey, I kind of fell into Hermeticism. And there's these 7 Hermetic principles that again, I love learning and understanding principles. They're thousands of years old. They predate Christianity, but they're probably the closest thing to a blend of spirit and science that you can find in any kind of traditional texts. And we based our wedding vows, on the 7 Hermetic principles.
We mentioned this the last time.
Yeah,
that's true. I thought that sounded familiar.
Yeah. So it's for me. I guess that masculine energy is really about being very not. I go back to identity, and at the same time, I don't want to identify myself as any one thing. So. I feel that that masculine energy has a vector to it, like in its core. It is a line. It is a direction. It's something. It's like a sun. It shines and it just outputs and whatever is capable of receiving that is feminine energy. Receiving that shine. And so, in some ways I am a sun and she is a moon and she reflects my light, but it's not like I'm dominating her. I don't tell the moon what to do. The moon changes more frequently than the sun ever will, right? And the sun can't do anything about it, That's so there's like these interesting balances. And in that analogy, the earth is this world that we want to create together. I will shine light on this earth, and I will say, okay, it's a day over here, let's go. And moon can say, yeah, I agree, full moon daytime, let's do it, or no, I'm on the other side over here looking at the, this side of this creation, this dark side of creation that you're not paying any attention to right now, so there's a lot of that happens.
Do you think that you could have done this healing without each other?
Man, that's a great question, too. Seriously.
You should do a show, because you're great with questions.
Yeah. You should have a radio show. Oh, man. No, I do think that there's unlimited ways to heal. I think that there is numerous things that could have happened. But when I look at where I'm at now, I don't think I could have been. I don't think I could be where I'm at right now without Chuck. And
yeah, I wouldn't be where I'm at without her, because, my scientific mind, I would have gone too left, too logic, too structured, and not allowed for this giant ball of intuition, in my world.
Yeah, and he's helped me develop more of the logical, rational mind, still being highly intuitive, but realizing that there's there's a benefit and a value in that as well. And so having more balance just within myself too. So we kind of, again, like that yin and yang, energy.
So we're getting close to the end of the show. I like your answers, but do you have any advice for people that maybe have been through something? Maybe they don't have the luxury of the healer wifey. Like what are some good tips besides going to see Melina and maybe doing some healing work? Like, is there
Besides
anything?
that?
Not
Okay.
everybody wants to do that. Not everybody's ready to do that. Some people, they're just less woo.
Yep.
But what is something that anybody could do to start like working through their shit?
That's a really good question too. I think what's really one of the most important pieces I can suggest is for people to get really honest with themselves and to really start to tune in more to their own intuition, because everyone is intuitive. They might just have certain things blocking it, but really tuning into who they are and what they need, like on all levels. So, whether it's physically what their body needs or on a soul level, like making a habit of saying, okay, what does my soul need from me today? And just really starting to tap into that inner wisdom that lies within us all. That can be so empowering and it's so important, I think, in helping humanity continue to rise up and evolve together.
If I may, translate this into the male half of the audience. Microtransactions. It boils down, seriously, every moment that we are conscious, we are making choices, whether or not to give attention to a thought, whether or not to put something into our body, whether or not to break away from a meeting to go to the bathroom. Like, those kinds of choices are all in this world of fear and love, and there's no in between. It's all on this scale of I'm either caring for something with love or I'm avoiding something, and there is a choice in the middle where you basically do nothing.
You can avoid something with love too. You
can avoid things lovingly, like toxins, but that for a man, like, and really for anybody, I would recommend that you develop this awareness that allows you to pay attention to your thoughts, because there's this moment that people forget when a thought comes in or a desire comes in to your mind. Most people just immediately react
and accept it as true too,
and accept it as true, especially if it's a feeling, and a very overwhelming feeling. I'm feeling this feeling very powerful, so that must be true. That's not always the case. There can be very powerful, overwhelming emotions that are based in a lie, and that is how politics works, right? And so that's where you have to make a sovereign choice to be free of those mind addictions, or whatever you want to call them, and transact yourself away bit by bit by bit. That's why I say microtransactions. It's just these little tiny decisions every single moment, with thoughts and words and actions, and again, getting to a place where eventually you're thanking your past self for all those little collections of microtransactions that you did that brought you to a certain place.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. And I feel like that's where we're at. Like, I feel like we're like in this place where we're really able to be grateful for our past selves all the time right now. Like, I mean, that's how I feel.
Yeah.
Super grateful.
Yeah. So glad we did that. Thank God we did that. Yeah.
Yeah, this is definitely an interesting time shift for everybody. And I think that, I don't know, sometimes I look at the news and I'm like, oh man, we're screwed. But then other times
that's what they want you to think.
No. But then I have conversations like these, and my faith in humanity and like our progress is restored, and it's always there. But I think it's hard to be, optimistic. But, I always think of this, Ross Ulbricht was like pretty much like the crappiest life. He always has something that he's grateful for. And he said to me once, he's like, it doesn't matter what happens with this or what happens with that. As long as we're alive, there's reason to hope. And it's totally true. So don't despair, everyone. Even in the darkest times, like, you can get through and be,
yes, you can.
like,
That's funny. I think of Ross quite a bit. I get tingles thinking about it because I've been in prison, and not for as long as he has, but you know, it's I see him growing, and I see him still trying to reach out. Even so, he hasn't given up on humanity himself, which I think is incredible. And I want to do anything I can to help him out. You know, that's one of those things. I would love for him to come work at Flote. We actually talked about it with the Flote team when he made a more recent post about decentralizing social media. It's some great stuff he's putting out there.
Definitely. Well, I hope we all get to free Ross. I'm working on it. You're working on it. All that collective power's got to go somewhere.
Right.
I am going to hit you guys up and hopefully see you because now we're both Florida babies. And,
Oh, you are here.
Yeah, I'm in Miami. So, like, part of time. So this has been awesome. Thank you so much for joining me on the show a second time, or actually semi-third time. But before we go, I want to give you an opportunity to drop your links. Like, Melina, where can people get, healing lessons? Chuck, how can people get involved with Flote? Tell us.
Yeah, so my website is thedivineiswithin.com. Thedivineiswithin.com. And you'll find me, my health coaching services, and a course that I offer on reversing chronic illness, and you can book an emotion code session with me, all that good stuff.
Oh, I like that. What's an emotion coach? It's just when you're like, all right, cry it out, girl. Cry it out.
No, like we talked about earlier, the emotion codes.
Those trapped emotions.
Yeah, the trapped emotions, yeah.
All right, okay. Just
the emotional baggage. Letting go of the emotional baggage.
All right, I like that idea. And Chuck, what about you? What's going on in Flow? I love those homies.
Yeah, so, flote.app, flote.app, or joinflote.com. We are undergoing some internal shifts and growth. We've had some recent investment, so we've got a pretty good runway in front of us, and we've got some exciting things coming that are really intended to serve free speech and free trade with many tokens and many personalities around the world. So.
Excellent.
Yeah, definitely check it out and jump ship. Get off Facebook and tell your friends.
All right, awesome. Thank you so much, everybody. If you like this show, go to proofoflovecast.com, share it around, follow us on Twitter, support your fellow crypto freedom lovers, and I don't know, we'll see you next time on Proof of Love.
Thanks.
Do you like cryptocurrency, politics, economics, activism, or art? Then check out the Tatiana Show, where you can learn all about it in a fun and non-intimidating way, as if you're just hanging with friends. Go to thetatianashow.com and listen now. Proof of Love has been brought to you by CryptoMediaHub.com, a boutique marketing and PR agency for Bitcoin and beyond. Show me your heart. I know that it's beating. Tell me that you love me too. So I know your heart is true, 'cause I need some proof of love. 'Cause I need some proof of love. 'Cause I need some proof of love. Thank you for listening to Proof of Love. Please follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Proof of Lovecast. More episodes can be found at proofoflovecast.com. And make sure you leave a review on iTunes and tell your friends. You are listening to Proof of Love with Tatiana Moroz and Lauren Kasovitz. This show may contain adult content, language, and humor and is intended for mature audiences. If that's not you, please stop listening. Nothing you hear on Proof of Love is intended as financial advice, legal advice, therapy, or really anything other than entertainment. Please take everything that you hear with a grain of salt. Oh, and if you're hearing us on an affiliate network, the ideas and views expressed on this show are not necessarily those of the network that you're listening on, or of any of the sponsors or affiliate products that you may hear about on the show.